Today is Tuesday, October 25th. Unfortunately, we have to tell you about another school shooting, this time in St. Louis, Missouri. Also, what the so-called Nation's report card found about student learning, and what the Justice Department revealed about a Chinese spy ring. Plus, remembering a comedian and actor who became a social media star with his uplifting videos, a potential upside of letting kids play video games, and the premium coffee chain launching a new option to drink at home. Those stories and more news next. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. Well, today, St. Louis, Missouri is grieving after a deadly school shooting. A teacher and a 16-year-old girl were shot and killed inside a high school yesterday. 7 others were hurt, and hundreds have been traumatized by this. It happened at Central Visual and Performing Arts High School. Officials say the gunman was a 19-year-old former student who just graduated last year. Police shot and killed him once they got to the scene. The police commissioner said the shooter was using a rifle and had nearly a dozen 30-round high-capacity magazines with him. But he says the officers quickly arrived and helped students escape. A school security guard had spotted the shooter trying to break into the school through a locked door and called for help. It's not clear how the gunman eventually did get in. But students barricaded doors and huddled in classroom corners. Some jumped from windows or ran out of the building to escape. Police don't know the motive for the shooting at this point. Officials say he lived with his family and had no criminal history. Grief counselors are being made available to help students and staff. Also yesterday, the teen who opened fire at a high school in Michigan last year pled guilty to 24 criminal acts, including terrorism and first-degree murder. You may remember this case. 4 students died and 6 other people were hurt. The teen's parents are accused of buying him the gun as a gift and ignoring his need for mental health treatment. They're actually charged with involuntary manslaughter. The teen shooter is facing life in prison without parole. Well, it's known as the Nation's report card, and the grade is not great for America's students. The nationwide educational testing program took a look at how 4th graders and 8th graders were doing in math and reading. The results showed the kids' math scores suffered the biggest drop since the testing began. Reading scores were also down significantly. You probably already know the reason: the pandemic and remote learning. To be clear, these aren't the lowest scores have ever been, but it is the fastest rate scores have declined. The test measured scores this year and compared them to what they were in 2019 before the pandemic began. The results were especially bad for racial minorities. The big question now is what to do for these students, and there's plenty of talk and debate about possible solutions. Some experts say it's all hands on deck between schools, parents, and communities to stop finger pointing and to figure out how to recover. The U.S. Justice Department says it broke up a Chinese spy ring operating in the United States. Major espionage charges have now been filed against more than a dozen people. The DOJ and FBI made the announcement in a special televised press conference. The suspected spies were involved in 3 different plots. One included a bribery scheme to hurt an ongoing investigation into a Chinese mobile company, Huawei. As U.S. officials explained, the 2 defendants believed they had recruited a U.S. worker to help them steal protected documents on the case from the U.S. Attorney's Office. In reality, the person the suspected spies actually recruited was a secret double agent working for the FBI. In the other cases agents busted, a group of Chinese citizens were trying to force a Chinese-born U.S. citizen back to their home country against their will. In the third case, spies infiltrated an academic center in New Jersey and tried to steal essential information about important U.S. academic institutions. Attorney General Merrick Garland said these cases are more evidence that the Chinese government is trying to undermine the U.S. and crack down on its own critics living abroad. Because most of the suspects in this case live overseas, though, only 2 of the 13 people charged are in custody. The United Kingdom has a new person lined up to serve as prime minister, and it's someone for the history books. Rishi Sunak has been chosen to run one of the world's most powerful countries. He's the first person of color to be selected for UK's most important political position, the first of Indian descent. Rishi Sunak will become the country's first Hindu prime minister and the youngest leader in more than 200 years. Sunak is expected to take the reins today after a formal meeting with Britain's King George III. The whole process is moving quickly. Just last week, outgoing Prime Minister Liz Truss announced she would be resigning. Her time as the leader did not even last 2 months, making her the quickest prime minister in modern British history. Sunak's welcome, though, won't last long. He's stepping into some major problems. The UK's economy is in trouble. So if Sunak doesn't bring confidence to the British public, perhaps his leadership could be in jeopardy as well. Stay tuned. More news still coming up, but first, let's take a quick break for our sponsor. When you need a new hire, it often feels like you have to find them ASAP. So for top talent fast, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Hate waiting? Indeed's U.S. data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. Plus, Indeed has a suite of powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. So instead of making your candidates jump through hoops, Indeed's virtual interview tool means there's nothing to download. You just click and talk. You can message, schedule, and interview top talent all in one place. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why when you sponsor a job, you only pay for quality applications from resumes in the database matching your job description. Visit Indeed.com/newsworthy to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/newsworthy. Indeed.com/newsworthy. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. He was best known for his roles on the TV shows Will and Grace, American Horror Story, and Murphy Brown, and more recently as an internet sensation. But now the world is saying goodbye. Veteran actor, comedian, singer, and social media star Leslie Jordan died at 67 years old. Jordan was driving through Hollywood yesterday when his car crashed into a building. It's not yet known if he had some sort of medical emergency, but he was the only person involved. Jordan was a bright spot during the pandemic on social media, making people laugh with his tales of growing up in the South, complete with his Tennessee twang. Jordan, who was unapologetically gay, was a strong advocate for the LGBTQ community. His agent said, quote, "The world is definitely a much darker place today without the love and light of Leslie Jordan." Well, the FDA is reportedly working on some new regulations for mammograms. It's because mammograms can't always spot a tumor if breasts are dense, so another test is needed. So the new rules would require women be notified about their density or tissue type and given options for more screenings. More than 38 states already require patients be notified about breast density, but this would set new rules nationwide. Breast density is not something you can really feel or tell just by looking. It's instead detected by a mammogram. About half of women over 40 in the U.S. have dense breasts. The FDA could release new regulations before the end of the year. Well, there's some growing concern about the threat of a so-called triple-demic and how it might impact kids and hospitals. You've probably heard of a twin-demic, referring to both COVID-19 and the flu having spikes in cases at the same time. But now there's been a surge of severe cases from a third type of virus, RSV. RSV is a respiratory illness that can cause breathing issues for babies and young children, as well as those with a weakened immune system. Cases this year are spreading quickly after having been pretty quiet the past 2 years since kids were staying inside. Now hospitals are seeing a big jump in the number of kids coming in with breathing problems from RSV. Some hospitals even say they're already feeling overwhelmed. It's important to note RSV is actually very common. Most kids will become infected by the age of 2 and won't need to go to the hospital. It usually presents as a cold with a fever, runny nose, and cough. There is no vaccine, but scientists are working on one. As for the flu, Walgreens is already reporting flu activity that is 10 times higher nationwide compared to the last flu season, and it's especially high in the South. And then there's still COVID-19. Cases of the virus are still considered pretty low right now, but there's concern that as the weather gets colder and people stay inside, there could be a rise in cases. So overall, doctors are recommending washing hands thoroughly, staying home when you're sick, and getting the vaccines available to you. A new study found a potential upside to letting kids play video games for hours. The study was done in part with the National Institutes of Health, and it found that kids who played 3 hours or more a day did better on memory and impulse control tests compared to those that didn't. Now, this is not the first study to prove this, but it is the largest one done on it to date. The study included about 2,000 9 and 10-year-olds who were allowed to pick what games they played. Many chose fast-paced action-adventure type games rather than puzzles or logic ones, which are slower. The lead author of the study said about the findings, maybe video games are better than watching TV. But it's important to note, this does not prove that video games cause cognitive improvements, just that there's some type of link. Well, Beyond Meat is now launching a new type of fake meat, steak. Like all the other Beyond Meat products, its new plant-based steak alternative is meant to mimic beef in both taste and texture. A serving even has 21 grams of protein. It's actually made mostly from fava bean protein. The new option comes at a time the company has been facing a drop in sales, so much so Beyond Meat recently let go 19% of its workforce. The company blames record inflation, but says it's working on new growth and lots of opportunities for the long term. Another new product catching people's attention, the popular barista coffee chain Blue Bottle is launching instant coffee. Blue Bottle, which is owned by Nestle, will start selling jars of the freeze-dried crystals that can be stirred into warm water or milk on November 7th. Well, that's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Trivia Tuesday, when we ask a different trivia question every week. But first, this podcast is sponsored by ZocDoc. When I got pregnant, I went to an OBGYN's office that a friend recommended, and she was good. But then I never actually saw her again. With every new appointment, I was sent to a different doctor in the same office, so it was hard to connect. And then when I had to go back in 2 different times to get my blood drawn because of 2 separate mix-ups, I knew I needed to switch doctors, yes, in the middle of my pregnancy. Ultimately, I'm so glad I switched. I had a much better experience with the new doctor, but it made me realize I should have done more research or looked at more options originally to maybe avoid that situation in the first place. ZocDoc is a free app that shows you doctors who are patient-reviewed, take your insurance, and are available when you need them. Whether you want to search for a specialist that takes your insurance or read more patient reviews, ZocDoc can help. Go to ZocDoc.com/newsworthy and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then start your search for a top-rated doctor today. Many are available within 24 hours. That's ZocDoc.com/newsworthy. ZocDoc.com/newsworthy. Okay, now back to Trivia Tuesday. Today's trivia question is, what is the highest grossing movie of all time? You can answer the question and play along with us on Instagram. Find and follow us at NewsworthyPod and look for the trivia quiz in our Instagram stories over the next 24 hours. As for last week's trivia question, who won the first NBA Finals MVP award? The answer is Jerry West. MVP stands for Most Valuable Player, and Jerry West won the award back in 1969 while playing for the Los Angeles Lakers. In fact, West was not only the first player to win the NBA Finals MVP, but he's also the first and only person to win it while on the losing team. West is also known for being the silhouette of the NBA logo. The man who designed the logo saw a picture of West playing and used it to create the logo, much to the surprise of West, who did not initially know he was the new face or outline of the NBA. West retired from playing basketball in 1974 as one of the league's top scorers. He later went on to have an incredibly successful career in the Lakers front office, helping put together the championship teams in the early 2000s with Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal. All right, thank you so much for listening today. We'll be back with another news roundup tomorrow. Until then, have a great day.